a game, but it's not fair. I break the rules, so I don't care. So I keep doing my own thing. Walking tall against the rain. Victories within the mile. Almost there, don't give up now. Only thing that's on my mind is who's gonna run this town tonight.
Sometimes all I think about is you. Late nights in the middle of June. He waves been faking me out. Can't make you happier now. Sometimes all I think about is you. Late nights in the middle of June. He waves been faking me out. Can't make you happier now. Usually I put something on.
All right, we're starting Campus to Canton week with the wide receiver position, C2C rankings. Let's go live right now. It's Campus to Canton week, baby. Matthew Bruning, Felix Sharp for CampusToCanton.com. We have not done position summits in a long time. And if you are new to the college fantasy game, traditional college fantasy or C2C, we've got something for you this entire week. And we've already got people in the chat. Let me just say, ever since we started, I've been kind of amazed at how integrated we come in people's lives. And I don't want to take that for granted. So wherever you are, however long you've been a subscriber or listener of ours, just appreciate you. Just appreciate you coming and joining with us. If you do want to celebrate or excuse me, help us grow the college fantasy football game, tune in to all of the shows, all of the ranking summits, the mock draft on Wednesday, the best ball show on Thursday. We're going to, Matt, I'm going to be live streaming between now and like 9 o'clock tonight. We've got, so right now, I should have put the schedule up on the screen. That would have been helpful. Do I have the schedule here? I don't have the schedule here. We've got the C2C wide receivers ranking show right now. At 6 o'clock today, we have the CFF ranking show. And then at 8 p.m. today, we've got our freshman class review, 2026 freshman class overview with On Three's Alan True. So there ain't a whole lot. Spring games are over. Y'all don't watch the NBA. College basketball is over. So you might as well tune in to us for Campus Canton Week as we get you kind of sort of ready for the going into the NFL draft. I think let's get to 50 likes.
Yeah.
That would be a world record, Matthew. There's no video on YouTube that has ever reached 50 likes. So let's see if we can get that world record. Let's get into, and Austin Nace is going to be joining us here soon. Let's get into the wide receiver position, Matt. I like to think about, where does this class stand between previous classes? I remember when we first got into the C2C world, there were players like Breece Hall, Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan Robinson at the wide receiver position. Devonta Smith was a high first-round draft pick in startup drafts. Jalen Waddle was a high first-round pick in supplemental drafts. Like, that was kind of the landscape we were dealing with. What's your overall take on the wide receiver position in C2C as we look at 2026? Because we've got a monster up top.
Yeah.
But how do you feel about the rest of the player pool?
I mean, I think it's probably, it's hard to say deeper than it has been the past couple years. There are a lot of players in the wide receiver pool that I like, and I would say overall, at least probably when I'm looking at it positionally from the other positions we'll talk about throughout this week, I feel like it is stronger. There's a lot of guys probably as we go lower in the rankings of the wide receivers that I think have a chance to possibly fight for some of those top spots. I mean, I think ever since we've had this company, I've been a little bit more aggressive on ranking freshmen higher. I remember kind of actually one of our original battles in one of like me and you being on the same team was having Marvin Harrison Jr. much higher than everybody else on our team. I think we had him as like a top 15 or 20 wide receiver.
We had him as a top 20 as a freshman. Yeah, we did.
Yeah, and everybody else was kind of off on him because he wasn't even the top wide receiver in the Ohio State class. Right. And so I've kind of ranked some of those guys higher. I'm sure we'll talk about them today. There's two of them that I have very high. But I mean, again, you go down to like just looking at my rankings, a guy like Jace Brown, who me and you had a conversation about pretty recently on a C2C live episode. I mean, I have him at 14. I think you could make the argument you could have him as high as 7 or 6. So, and again, that's not real far off that 7 or 6 spot. Then going down to like a wide receiver like Eric Singleton at 24, Wyatt Young down at 27, Deuce Robinson at 30. Like, I think there's a lot of guys you could have arguments about being higher up in the ranking. So I think it speaks to the depth of it, maybe not the elite talent. I think if I'm looking at the top of the class, it's like 4 guys, maybe 5 that like you feel real good about. And then there's a pretty, in my opinion, decent drop before you hit that tier 2. And in my opinion, that tier 2 is pretty depth, like pretty lengthy. You could go down into the 30s, in my opinion, for that tier 2 group.
You know, what's funny is like, yes, we did have Marvin Harrison ranked as a top 20 wide receiver. You and I did coming in that freshman class. But since that class, I have deferred away from freshmen, and I am not as high on those guys early on. Like, I tend to rank those guys a little bit lower. And we're going to see when we get into the top 30 here that we do have a lot of true freshmen ranked pretty highly. Appreciate Frank, Lewis, Kevin, all in the chat. And Michael, I see you guys. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Thank you for joining us live. Matt, why don't you, and Austin will be here, and we'll get to ask him this question too. I feel really comfortable evaluating quarterbacks, and that's like supposed to be the hard. I feel mildly comfortable evaluating running backs, but wide receiver is the position where I'm like, this is hard because there are so many different types of wide receivers that can have success. You can have the quick twitch guys. You can have the contested catch guys. You can have speed guys. You can have tall guys. You can have short guys. You know, there's a huge difference between Antonio Brown and Calvin Johnson. Like, the skill sets are so vast that the skill sets that can have success in the NFL, in college football, is so vast. What is your process for evaluating this position, which to me is very important because this is how we get longevity on the college side and the NFL side of our C2C leagues.
Yeah, I think I'm at a little bit of an advantage in a way when it comes to I think all the positions, because I am part of the recruiting team. So like when I'm not saying that you don't, I know you actually do look at the freshmen, but
I have an advantage.
Like in talking about the players and in a way of like, not everybody who works here at C2C looks at these guys from juniors in high school. So like I get to see how they're kind of progressing. So I think very early on, I get an idea of maybe what these players are good at, what they could, and actually, since Austin's not here, I can say this. Actually, it's been proven out by Matt Powell that I am the best at grading wide receivers coming out of high school, actually in multiple positions.
Objectively? Really?
No, the statistics show that I've been the best when it comes to scores on that other thing. And
you've had some big hits. I mean, Quinshon Judkins is the one that you could really hang. And Sam Levitt, you were very high on. Yeah. But you probably can't do better than Quinshon. As a company, we can't do better than Ashton Genty. But is there a wide receiver that you can remember like hitting on that was not highly ranked? My best is probably Jameson Williams, because when he was at Ohio State, I'm like, this dude is undervalued. And then he had the season that he had at Alabama.
I mean, I don't know. There's not one that comes to mind. I think it's just more of it speaks to the way Matt put it is just like my grades have been closer to proving out for college production and all that other stuff. Where I think Matt's been really good on the quarterback side of things, which bothers me because that's the position I personally love to watch the most. But so when it comes to that side of the wide receiver thing, for me, the hardest thing I think is, as you just mentioned, there's so many different wide receivers that can succeed again, not even just at the college level, but the NFL level. One of our famous battles, JSN, where it's kind of like this guy's not going to be able to thrive in the NFL in just a slot position, and he's been absolutely killing it, right? Like, but I think that's a special case for each one of those. For me, I've really kind of come into, and obviously we just did a show recently about this, is paying more attention to the systems that these wide receivers are going into, and specifically the coaching that they get, and if they help develop those guys more, and kind of trying to learn what the wide receivers could learn to develop more. I think becoming such a great route runner. I don't remember what show you talked about this on. It might have been the show that we did the coaching. We were talking about like Devontae Adams, and I think that was actually, maybe it was you and me. I don't, but just like, if you're so good at route running, like you're running pristine routes coming out of high school, I think that translates to any level. So you're already at an advantage where like a guy like Tristan Keys, who I'm sure we'll talk about, he's already such a good route runner, but he's going to a place like Tennessee where none of us look at that offense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's kind of like, okay, well, if he didn't have that coming in, chances are it's not going to develop. And that's kind of where I've taken trying to figure out what I think prospects are going to kind of continue to move forward into the NFL. But I think it's a very hard thing to do. I think it's why the services, I think they're very good at what they do. Why we definitely aim for different things, college production and everything. But I don't have a specific process that I stick to. I think it's for each prospect I kind of look at from a different lens, because I think talent, where they're going, depth chart, coaching staff, will they transfer, all those things. Like, I think you can't have a solid or a set regimen you stick with on every player now, and even every position, because
that brings up a good question. That brings up a good question, because I want to know, now we're talking about the C2C format. If you've never heard of Campus to Canton Fantasy Leagues, it's where you have a college fantasy team and an NFL fantasy team, and your college team serves as a pipeline to your NFL team. So that's why it's important that we identify these players, as freshmen, because we draft them as true freshmen. But you're talking about development and where they land. What percentage of the pie would you say is attributable when we're talking about success at the wide receiver position? What percentage of that pie would you say is attributable to talent, and what percentage is attributable to, what scheme that they're in? Speaking of schemes, I can think of, we always, back when he was at North Carolina and Ole Miss, we always wanted to know Phil Longo's slot wide receiver, or Mike Gundy. These are all coaches that I got to think of some more recent coaches, but Mike Gundy's outside wide receiver, from James Washington to Taylor Wallace to Justin Blackman, like guys like that. Like so what percentage would you say of the success of a player going from college to NFL is that scheme, getting in the right scheme, and what percentage is talent?
So if I'm just splitting the pie in between those parts, I think it's honestly close to 60-40, if not maybe 55-45. I think we've seen a ton of extremely talented college football players go into wrong systems. We've joked about it on shows, and probably even more so behind the scenes, about we need to start up a C2C consulting service, because some of these wide receivers are just going to get the money instead of going somewhere that's going to fit their actual skill sets. I think it matters so much where you're going to. And again, not even just the coaching that you're going to get, but the depth chart you're going to. Just because Florida comes a calling doesn't mean you need to go there, especially when you're looking at, they've got 6 wide receivers ahead of you right now. So in my opinion, I think it could be as close to, I would give a little bit more of an edge to talent, because we've seen players like, and I think we use him a lot, DK Metcalf, who was just so good at like the 3 routes he ran in college at Ole Miss, and it translates to the NFL. But then when people use that example, can we not honestly say that is like DK Metcalf is an elite athlete? He's one of one. Like, sure, maybe there's like a handful of guys. We just mentioned JSN. Like, he's making and Amon-Ra St. Brown at the slot receiver position, right? You're not going to see a ton of JSNs and Amon-Ra St. Browns, though, in going from college and into the NFL like that. I think those are the best of the best at their position, and chances are, more often than not, we're going to see players who are just a little bit better than average doing those things. So I think the schemes really do matter, because another thing NFL looks at production. They look at all this athleticism stuff. It's why we pay so much attention to it, because it matters for us on those wide receivers going to the NFL. And we've seen Felix, man, again, we've been doing what, 5 years? We used to do those draft shows. We would watch wide receivers get drafted in the third round. There's no reason that guy should be going there because he's not talented enough. But why? Because he produced on the college football field. So then the schemes and what these schools do for them matter, even if the talent doesn't. So I'd say I'll give a little bit of an edge to the talent and say 60-40.
I think in the NFL that they would say that the talent is the thing that matters. In college football, scheme absolutely matters.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of more examples like this, but think of somebody like Nico Collins.
Yeah.
Nico Collins, who never had a 800-yard, 700-yard season at Michigan under. He didn't have a 600-yard season at Michigan under Jim Harbaugh. But there are other examples like that. If this player had just gone to, a Lincoln Riley, a Steve Sarkisian, somebody like that, they would have probably had a chance. But because one, went to a school that doesn't throw the ball, two, went to a depth chart that they couldn't ascend up, their development was stunted. So
he did have a 700-yard season. So
he had a 700-yard season?
Yeah, that was his best season, yeah.
Okay. What else here before we go? Is there at the running back position, I prefer like the 6 foot 220, 215, 220 player. Is there a type or a profile at the wide receiver position that you prefer? And if you need some, I can filibuster for you if you're thinking about it. Because go ahead.
For me, I think it's within that 6 to 6'1" range, right around 200, especially if they're a very good route runner. I just think the 6'4" to 6'6" guys who are possession wide receivers or maybe even deep threats are kind of going away in the game. I just don't think that we're finding those guys as much.
We're gonna see. We'll see once we get to the top 30. I disagree with you.
Okay, but I think the guys who are kind of in that middling of the height and weight, who again, I lean more toward the guys who can create separation at all three levels of the route, whether it's on the line, within the route, or at the catch point, are really kind of where specifically college football, and I think NFL is going to too. So I think those are the wide receivers I lean more towards, which is kind of the opposite on running backs. I prefer my smaller running backs for whatever reason. But yeah, wide receivers, I'd say right around that 6 foot to 6'1" guys, right around 200 pounds.
Tell me if you disagree with this. Okay. I think that the elite route runners are the easiest to scout. The quick twitch guys. Think about guys on this. I was another player that I was really high on is Ladd McConkey when his value was, you could have got him in the 40th round. Ladd McConkey puts DBs on skates. Like, it's the easiest thing to see on tape where a defensive back in man coverage, either off or press, they're stumbling all over the place because they can't stay with the guy. Stephon Diggs fits into that category. Antonio Brown was the greatest to ever do it. Jerry Rice probably, but Antonio Brown was right up there as the greatest to ever do it. I love Stephon Diggs. Keenan Allen, if he was healthy, he could run routes until he was 40. Like guys like that. Chad Ochocinco, to be honest with you, Chad Ochocinco is not given enough credit for being one of the best route runners that we've ever seen. The other player, like I would never hit on Nico Collins because the 6'3", 210-pound receiver who can actually get open and then go corners now are like 6'1". Some of the boundary corners are big. They're big, just as big as the wide receivers now. Like the guys that can actually win in those matchups, it's few and far between. Okay. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to address in the chat main event. I don't think either one of those players. I don't think either one of those players were in our tier 3. I could be wrong, but I'm almost positive. Maybe Carnell Tate was in tier 3, but I know Mekhi Lemon was like a top 3 wide. Austin had him as his wide receiver 1. We all loved Mekhi Lemon, so I don't remember him being in tier 3. I could be wrong. I was trying to.
I mean, I feel like he's looking at the guide and telling you where.
Well, you might be right. That's what I say. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I could have swore because we were big fans of Mekhi Lemon. Always have been. I had him as tier. We had Mekhi Lemon in tier 1. I thought so. That now Carnell Tate we had Carnell Tate in tier 2. So yeah, I mean, we were not fans of Carnell Tate as a company, but Mekhi Lemon, because I mean, your boy was supporting Mekhi Lemon's breakout season when all y'all said it was going to be whatever that dude's name is. That's still not that good. Jacoby Lane. That's right. We had a Jacoby Lane campus life. Sorry, now the campus.
That's exactly the profile of wide receiver that I'm saying. Like that. Do people think? I don't know. I don't have NFL draft updates. Do people think Jacoby Lane is going to be a thing in the NFL? Because that's the exact type that big contested catch. Oh, look at how many contested catches that he make. That just profile just doesn't work.
Yeah,
at the NFL level.
No, I agree.
All right, let's go ahead and get into our top 30, and hopefully Austin will be able to make an appearance here. Drum roll, please. I feel like we should have some football music playing in the background, some Tundra music. Do you have any of that, Matthew?
I don't think so. I mean, I've got, we've got you. I mean, you want football music? Isn't technically, is it
Can
not
you
playing?
Play it at a low level? Play it at a low level.
Oh, you muted it. That's it. There we go.
That is not what. Okay, yeah. Turn it down. All right, here we go. Our 2026 C2C wide receiver rankings. The top 30. Jeremiah Smith, Ohio State. Cam Coleman, Texas. Decorian Moore, Oregon. Malachi Toney, Miami. Nick Marsh at Indiana. We got 2 Indiana receivers in the top 30. Bryant Wesco, Clemson at 6. Tristan Keys, Tennessee at 7. TJ Moore at 8. Chris Henry Jr., the freshman at Ohio State at 9. Dallas Wilson at 10. Ryan Coleman Williams, Mr. Dropsy himself, at 11. Number 12, Losier Brooks at Alabama. Vernell Brown at 13. Jace Brown at 14. And Eric Singleton, the veteran from Georgia Tech to Auburn, now to Florida, at 15. Matthew, what stands out to you about the top 30? I'll tell you what stands out to me. As I think we're getting a renaissance of the big athletic wide receiver. Cam Coleman, Nick Marsh, TJ Moore, Dallas Wilson. Those are all big possession X-style wide receivers. Are we getting a revival of that profile of player?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could put Chris Henry Jr. in there too. Yeah, I mean, maybe. Like I said, I think that's not the profile of wide receiver I tend to lean towards, but sure, there's a lot here in this top 15. The thing that sticks out to me is how many teams we have represented 2 wide receivers in this group, and how many are just outside that top 15. Again, 2 Florida wide receivers and Dallas Wilson, 3, with Vernell Brown and Eric Singleton, 2 Alabama wide receivers, 2 Ohio State wide receivers, 2 Clemson wide receivers. Like, there's a lot of double wide receiver players in here in the rooms, which I guess we're gonna, hopefully the quarterbacks are up here when we talk about quarterbacks in a couple of days, because they're, to be able to be this high, you've got to be supported by those quarterbacks. Nope.
Austin Ace joining us behind the ranking profile here. Austin, I'm assuming you're ready to go. What stands out to you about our top 15 at the wide receiver position?
I mean, I think the interesting thing this year is that it's a lot of guys with decent size, which I think is the first time that we can say that in a really long time. Obviously there are some smaller guys here. Jace Brown isn't the most physically imposing wide receiver, and neither is necessarily maybe a guy like Lotzier Brooks. But I mean, you've got Jeremiah Smith, Coleman, Nick Marsh, even like Wesco, like he's got some height to him. He's not a 5'10" kind of guy. I mean, there's a lot more physical size, I think. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's just that's what's come through the pipeline in the past couple of years, or if we are seeing a bit more of a renaissance of the larger, boundary or otherwise wide receiver. I don't have a good answer for that.
When you look at the board, and I wanted to ask you this at the outset, do you think that the wide receiver position is a position of strength in the college player pool? Is it mid? Like, how do you feel about this group of players compared to previous seasons?
I think from top to bottom, it's probably the strongest that it's been in the past 3 or 4 years. And I don't know. Again, I don't know. I don't think that's NIL keeping guys in school longer, because a lot of these guys haven't been in school long enough for that to have made an impact for why they're here. I just think it's the modern training that most of these kids have access to in high school, and the 7v7 stuff and the camp circuits and the footwork guys and all that. It just creates an environment where you can produce so many more of these guys than you can at a lot of other positions. So I think that's why. I think it's probably the deepest for CFF. QB might be deeper, like just pure college fantasy, but just like talent wise, I think wide receiver probably is the deepest position for C2C right now. That or maybe even like tight end relative to what tight end is.
Tight end the last couple of years has been very, very strong, in my opinion. I hate to put you on the spot, Austin, but you know the episode of Campus Life that I'm talking about. I heard this trade that you made, and he's smiling. You can't see that he's smiling behind the screen. But you traded our number 4 wide receiver, Malachi Toney, and you got a bevy of, I think, NFL guys back. And I know how you think. Do you believe Malachi Toney is a Trojan horse, a Rondale Moore style Trojan horse?
No. No. And Rondale was a guy that I didn't really like at the time. And I think that was a somewhat decent lesson on. I thought that I could see enough of him working deep where I could project him being able to do that in the NFL. And obviously the NFL didn't agree. I just was wrong on it. I think Toney has more upside to do a lot more things than Rondale Moore did. Because he's bigger. Like Moore was pretty small. I don't have his measurements offhand, but I think
he was like 5'7". He was like 5'7", but stocky.
He was tiny. The one thing that I will just say about Toney, the trade that you're talking about, I traded him and Chris Bell essentially for Jordan Tyson. And there was some like my roster needs another wide receiver next year, so Tyson made a lot more sense for it. Like there was that kind of stuff going on too. But to me, I just think like I am probably the low guy of our group maybe on Toney, and I have him at wide receiver 6. Miami. There are not a lot of instances, in my opinion, of him last year. They line him up one-on-one against the DB. He routes up the DB and he makes the catch. It was a lot of designed work to get the ball in his hands and to get him open.
It was.
Now, I'm not saying that he can't do it, but we haven't seen a lot of it yet. And for a guy like I like DeCorian Moore more than him, Oregon basically put DeCorian Moore on an island last year and said, "You're our guy. You're going to go up. You're going to go up again one-on-one. Teams are going to know where you are." Very little movement to, get him open to get different looks on him. Like Miami did all of that. Oregon didn't. So that really makes a difference when you're kind of trying to pick between two of these guys, I
think. Listen, by the way, that's why I was out on Ryan Wingo. Like there are players that can do this on a high level. The highest level is somebody like Malachi Toney, Rondale Moore, Laviska Shenault. But Malachi Toney is kind of on that spectrum. Kevin Concepcion at NC State, a lot of schemed up stuff. Now he ran routes too, but not as bad as like Ryan Wingo or Laviska Shenault. But Matt, somebody could be box scout, especially the NFL draft community. They can go box scout Malachi Toney and say, "Oh, he had 109 receptions for 1,200 yards his freshman season. He must be a great, down the field all around wide receiver." And do you agree with Austin and me, to be honest with you, that he hasn't necessarily shown that on tape, which is why he's at 4, not number 2?
Yeah, I think I actually don't know, Austin, where you have Malachi Toney ranked. 6. So I'm right there with you. So we both have him at 6. And again, I think a lot of that comes into what you were saying. I mean, the thing is, him in that offense, now getting Darian Mensah, I think, again, we have to account for the college side of things. But yes, I definitely have concerns about maybe what he will be at the next level. But would I be shocked if Malachi Toney produces something close to what he did this past season at Miami? Again, no, which then means he's going to continue to have value. So if you're talking about it from the, as you put it, Trojan horse thing, like I think it would be smart to possibly move him if you continue to have those concerns. Again, I know Laviska Shenault's one that we all kind of, I think, I don't remember if anybody was on your side on that, Felix, when we talked about. I know you were very against Laviska.
He should have been playing running back. He should have been playing running back for a very long time.
Yeah, so I don't remember where the rest of the company stood on Shenault and everything else. But yeah, I don't think he should be at 4. My assumption he's at 4 because Colin must have him at least a little bit higher than Austin, because I'm in the exact ranking line with Austin, have him at 6.
Austin, let's say that there's somebody watching that has never played in a C2C league or a college fantasy league before. They can go look up the stats for all of these players except for 2. Tristan Keys, and Chris Henry, the two freshmen in our top 15. What would you say to that person about how much faith they should have in them compared to some guys that we have college tape and statistics on?
I mean, I think when you're talking about why we have some of these guys ranked really highly, I think a lot of it comes down to upside and how much you're willing to balance. This guy has a lot more upside, but may fall flat on his face versus, I kind of know what Mario Craver is. I don't think Mario Craver is going to get a lot better. He's a tiny guy. You kind of got to scheme him open. He's going to do some unconventional things as a wide receiver. Like, to me, the upside on that from a fantasy perspective is a lot less than a guy who's 6'3", 185 pounds, who has like an 85th percentile athleticism score in our database, that ran a full route tree in high school, that can play on the boundary, and it's not necessarily restricted to the slot. And that's a guy like Tristan Keys going to Tennessee. So when we're talking about guys and skill sets and just, physical and like just usage upside, that's why guys like Keys and why Chris Henry Jr. are on this list versus maybe some guys that we've seen a little bit of, and we know that they're probably pretty good, but maybe not awesome. I think Chris Henry Jr. has already lost his black stripe at Ohio State, which is kind of the initiation thing that freshmen have to do there, and they have to do certain things and play well enough to do that. That probably bodes pretty well for him. And then Keys just being a really highly ranked guy, both by the services and by us. And again, the production in high school, the athleticism, just there's a lot to like there for some of these guys. Oh,
Matthew, for filibuster for me, because I want to show people what's available on the website. What are your thoughts about the two freshmen that we have here on our top 15, Ohio State wide receiver Chris Henry, and who we're looking at here on the screen, Tennessee wide receiver Tristan Keys?
Yeah, I think, and maybe some of this could be a little bit outdated thoughts on the freshmen. I know we talked earlier again about the Marvin Harrison Jr. Discussion we had, you and me, Felix, and how you've kind of changed your thoughts on the freshman wide receivers. I think with the freshman wide receivers, I mean, again, in supplemental drafts, this is just the cheapest that you're going to get them. And I think it comes to a certain amount. Like, there's not some freshman that I'm going to rank high, but I think Tristan Keys, he ranks in as both, actually, him and Chris Henry Jr. ranked in as tier 1 wide receivers for me. I think, as we talked about earlier, both of their landing spots and systems that they're going to be in are obviously very good for both of them. Again, we don't love the Tennessee system from a developmental part, but the thing is, Tristan Keys already has so much of his game refined that I don't think he needs to develop that much more. And I do trust Heupel to kind of get him the ball in the areas and within routes that Keys succeeds at. And that room, for the most part, is kind of empty. I think there's not a lot of real competition for Keys. So I think his ranking is very fair. I think the one you could question maybe could be Chris Henry Jr., because he's going in there. And again, we've seen throughout, Ryan Day's time as a head coach at Ohio State that he tends to lean on the veterans, right? So like we know guys like Brandon Ennis, who is still there, is going to get some run. I keep forgetting who the kid is that transferred over from UTSA.
Devin Voisin.
Yeah, Voisin. Yeah, so I mean, he might end up getting some, or no, McEwen. Sorry, McEwen. Devin McEwen. Yeah. McEwen, might be a guy who ends up starting just because he is a veteran, and not. I don't think Chris Henry Jr. is going to be a starter. The main thing is going to be for Henry is, can he get in with like those second teams at time, maybe come in for a Jeremiah Smith when they want to put him on the bench and get some run and break those year 1-0 theories. Because again, maybe not all these guys were exact studs, but the Brandon Ennis's, the Mylan Grahams, the Quincy Porters of the world, who were all at least within our tier 2 and the services all loved, all those guys ended up as year 1-0s. And they were all guys who could have fought for some playing time and just couldn't do it. And in Austin, you can help me with this part because I can't remember exactly what it was, but in his junior season, after one game, Chris Henry Jr., I believe, tore multiple ligaments in his knee. It was not just one. Is that not correct? It was like there was rumors. We don't know the exact injury, but there were rumors. Yeah. Rumors that there was multiple things wrong with his knee. He was used completely different as a senior than he was a junior. And after, I think it was like, he had 2 really good games to come back in his senior season and then was just used completely differently. I do have some concerns about Chris Henry Jr. I think he is still a phenomenal player, but I think you have to have some concerns about him possibly ending up as a year 1-0. So his ranking, I think you could argue, might be a little too high. But if he hits at that athleticism rating and what we think he could be, then it just to use this player as an example, I don't think he's Marvin Harrison Jr., but if you rank him too low, like we had Marvin Harrison Jr. in his true freshman, which he barely broke the year 1-0 theory. It only happened in the bowl game, but that's like the cheapest you're going to be able to get that kind of player, because if he does have that kind of season, you're going to have to trade all kinds of things to get that kind of player, if that makes sense. So Chris Henry's.
Well, not to pile on Chris Henry here, but in looking at the one-on-ones from the All-America week, he was kind of getting locked up. I don't know if you all saw that in the clips that were coming out. I was like, he was getting locked up in one-on-one. So I don't know if that would also cause you to have skepticism on his first year production. Let's go to the 15 or 16. Go ahead.
Can I say real quick on Chris Henry Jr.? Again, not that this matters, because yes, we've actually talked about that on the official, Austin, Matt Powell, and myself. He was Taven St. Clair's top target in the spring game the other day. Now, Felix, you and me had this discussion recently about how much the spring games matter. He was the only one who caught a touchdown. He was 4 for 96 and a touchdown. So it seems that he's possible. The rumors are he's doing much better with Ohio State. But yes, you were not wrong. In that All-American game, he did not look good.
Before I get to the 16 through 30 here, Austin, you weren't here when we opened. I want to ask you, because I'll just give you credit. I think that you are better at scouting wide receivers than I am. And you've hit on yes, but the other thing is, I might be giving you credit for things that Colin has said on Campus Life. But Roma Dunze and Jalen McMillan, those were some of your guys. Antonio Williams was a guy that you were touting from the beginning. So was Makai Lemon was a guy that you were touting from the beginning. Just talk about your process at scouting the wide receiver position.
Well, I think when you think about wide receiver nowadays, it seems like, obviously, if you can get a 6'4", 210 guy that runs a 4.4 and can play wide receiver as an actual receiver, like, that's the preferred player. But those come around once every 10 years. The NFL, I think, has mostly leaned into these guys that are a lot more versatile, that you can kind of line up inside and outside, that you can ask them to work at all three levels, or at least, maybe 2 of 3 within your skill set. And that you can win versus man and zone. And so I think those are the things that you have to start with when you're watching some of these guys is how versatile are they? If they go someplace, because if you're taking a guy that can only do one thing and he goes to a place that doesn't do that thing, you see that all the time. That just completely kills development. So guys that I've just really, really liked in the past, and not that they've necessarily been, hot takey at the time, but JSM was my top wide receiver in his class, because I thought, again, he can play all 3 positions. He can play all 3 levels. Like, check. And so that, Antonio Williams was a guy like that. We'll see what he does in the NFL. But those are the kind of guys that really I'm drawn to more, because I think that they have a lot more outs. And I think the NFL has kind of shifted that way toward preferring that kind of player.
I'm talking about Colin asked in the chat about this Ohio State. Does they usually have a habit of bringing in a number of transfer wide receivers in this past offseason? No. I know I see Felix answered with Heartline there. They usually recruit out of high school. Not only do they usually recruit out of high school, Heartline, in my opinion, and Austin, you tell me if you agree with this, I think has actually been fairly poor about recruiting good wide receivers over the past couple of years. We've given him a lot of credit for bringing in the Marvin Harrisons of the world, the Garrett Wilsons, the JSNs, and Jeremiah Smith. But if you really look at it, he's probably had a lot more misses than he actually has hits. And I think
Kyon Grays, Mylan Graham, Brandon Ennis, I think is not a hit.
Julian Fleming,
oh, big one, yeah,
was a guy that he was super sold on them, and they let that guy stay and start forever because Brian Hartline said he was going to turn him into this and that. So I actually think this is kind of a consequence of that, of not doing a good enough job recruiting out of high school over the past couple of years, and then a lot of the players transferring out because they're just not getting the run at Ohio State.
I was going to say, I think the answer is even a lot simpler than that for this particular year, is that they just had 6 guys or 7 guys leave, and they really had banked on Dixon Wyatt and Chris Henry Jr. coming in, and then when one of them flips on signing day, like, kind of have a problem at that point. You might have to add some depth to a room. So I would hesitate to say that I think it's part of a shift in their strategic whatever moving forward. But who knows? I think teams are going to be attacking roster construction differently with NIL money. And I don't mean like teams, like I just think like, some teams will do it one way. Some teams, like every team will kind of have their strategy. So maybe it is, but I don't know that based on what happened this offseason, I wouldn't say that necessarily I'd draw that conclusion for sure.
I said Devin Watson was the wide receiver from South Alabama. But Devin McEwen from UTSA is the receiver from is transferring in, is going to have one of those starting positions at Ohio State. Do either of you have an opinion on Devin McEwen? I don't.
I like him. When he transferred there, I said I thought he could start. Yeah.
I think he'll be a starter. It'll be interesting to see how good he's going to be because I don't know. I think Carnell Tate rose so much last year because he was able to kind of capitalize on all the double teams and everything Jeremiah Smith was getting. I'll be curious to see if McEwen can do that. I think they're different wide receivers in an aspect McEwen and Carnell Tate. But I think he's going to get the opportunity. I do think he's going to be the one starting on the other outside spot opposite of Jeremiah Smith. So the opportunity is going to be there.
Okay, let's go through our 16 through 30 here. Our 2026 wide receiver rank, C2C wide receiver rankings, 16 through 30. Another freshman, Jalen Lott at Oregon, Mario Craver at Texas A&M, Naheem Burrows at Clemson, Wyatt Young at 19. I want to ask about him. Ian Strong at 20, Sedarian Morgan at Alabama, Andrew Marsh at Michigan at number 22, Tamik Hines at USC at 23, Amarian Miller at 24, Malcolm Simmons, the transfer from Auburn. I don't remember. Was Malcolm Simmons where was he last year?
He was at Auburn before. Now he's at Texas Tech. Yeah.
He's at Texas Tech. Amari Thomas, the one-time UAB wide receiver at Houston now. Booby Feaster at 27, Charlie Becker at 28, Emmett Mosley at 29, and Easton Messer, Zach Kitley's slot wide receiver at 30. Austin, what's your take here on our 16 through 30 group? A little more speculation here in this group.
Yeah, you start feeling a little, less good about some of these guys. For some of them, it's either there's some freshmen here, as you noted, and I think they all maybe had an issue with their profile that maybe the two guys that we had up at the very top, didn't really have those kind of red flags. But I think for a lot of these guys, you can break them into two buckets. We think they're maybe ascending Devy, a future NFL talents, but we're speculating a little bit, or they're probably really primo college fantasy options, but we really don't think very highly of them as NFL guys. And this is the range for kind of making those decisions. If you're playing in a C2C league, Easton Messer, I don't know, I think we view him right now as a college fantasy guy. Maybe he becomes something else, but I don't think that we're there. Malcolm Simmons might be the same way, Ian Strong, Wyatt Young, these are Craver, these are guys that might be better in college. Andrew Marsh, if you asked me, I would say that, but maybe some others would disagree. So I think that's where you start getting into Wyatt Young. So that's the territory I think here overall.
Matt, what's your take on 16 through 30?
Yeah, honestly, it's not much different than Austin. We talked about the beginning of the show. I said that you could really kind of go down into the 30s. And I think all these guys are very similar in a similar bucket when it talks about upside and college and even NFL potential. I think you go even lower than 30. There's a couple guys that I do not have in my top 30 that are sitting here on this list. And I think you could Deuce Robinson's one that sticks out to me. I think could be talked about in the top 30. I think again,
Scudero.
Sure. Yeah. Danny Scudero. I have him lower than 30, but yes, I'm sure we're going to talk about that.
Yes, we are going to talk about that, Matt.
That ranking is wrong, but yes, we will talk about it. I don't have him in the top 30. There's different players. Again, I think the top end, as I said at the beginning of the show, of the wide receiver, I think is very strong. But then I think the second tier is got a lot of depth in players. I think you could argue could go honestly anywhere. You could argue any of these guys being in different positions, and I don't think you're wrong. And that's where I think the depth of the position comes from.
I want to come here to Wyatt Young. Well, actually, Wyatt Young and Easton Messer, and to a certain extent, Amari Thomas. Because from my perspective, I actually like Amari Thomas. Amari Thomas reminds me a little bit of the wide receiver from Western Kentucky who was drafted by the Jets. I can't remember his name. Yeah, Malachi Corley reminds me a little bit of Malachi Corley. But Young, Thomas, and Messer, they seem to be more CFF leaning plays, meaning we're obviously Wyatt Young was a wide receiver 1 at North Texas last year. Easton Messer was a top 5 wide receiver at FAU last year, and he's our CFF wide receiver number 2. Same for Amari Thomas. Do these guys have NFL potential, Matthew?
I mean, I do somewhat think Wyatt Young does. I don't know that I think Easton Messer necessarily does. I mean, again, we talked recently on a show about all these guys coming over from Oklahoma State, Wyatt Young being one of them. I think that, again, him making the move from North Texas here to Oklahoma State, staying with Eric Morris, again, I think the production on the college football side matters somewhat to these NFL teams. And I think maybe, they tend to just look at some of that stuff as something. Okay, you got his athleticism scores up right here. I mean, again, I think he is a good enough wide receiver. I don't know that I see him maybe going early day 2. Would I be shocked if he went at the end of round 3, early round 4? No. But if we're talking about him and Easton Messer, I feel more comfortable Wyatt Young producing enough and being a good enough wide receiver to make it to the NFL level than an Easton Messer.
Austin, what's your thoughts on that grouping of wide receivers? Amari Thomas at Houston, Wyatt Young at Oklahoma State, and Easton Messer at FAU.
Yeah, I mean, I think depending on who you talk to, Thomas and Young could get there. I mean, Thomas has been really, really productive, and he has a pretty strong athletic profile. I guess I can just mention this here. I've been working on building a tool that takes our athletic data and all of the college advanced data and basically morphs it all together and can spit out end usage data, like how ADOT and all that kind of stuff. And it can tell you who players are most like. Amari Thomas actually spits out Jalen Noel, Christian Kirk, and Torrey Smith as his top 3, which I think is interesting. It also has Michael Campanaro, Josh Huff, and Xavier Gibson. So
Michael Campanaro, wow.
Some maybe yes, maybe no names in there, but that's kind of the beauty of some of these G5, G6, whatever we're calling it now. Well, I guess Houston is P4, but he started at what, Tulane or UAB or whatever. So,
UAB. That was that was Collins' famous UAB transfer up to Alabama college.
Yeah, that's right. So
and to his credit, Collins wasn't. I mean, he didn't transfer to Alabama.
Close in colors. They were close in colors. He had the dream. He was just off a little bit on the school.
Well, Amari Thomas. You guys don't remember this because I'm the one who creates the thumbnails. We had Justice on to talk about Amari Thomas, and so I had a thumbnail that says, "Who the F is Amari Thomas?" And he's on a thumbnail of one of our things. And now, look how far he's come. He's now in our top 30 in our C2C rankings. Who else do I want to ask about here? Yeah, let's talk about Michigan. Speaking of Trojan horses, I think Andrew Marsh is one. I don't know that anything that he does is particularly exceptional. Am I on an island here, or Austin, do you agree with me?
No, I think you're right. And anytime I think we get, I don't want to say pushback, but sometimes we get questions on guys like Marsh where maybe they'll come out and perform, reasonably well as freshmen, and we didn't have them rated super aggressively as recruits, and then we don't really bump them up the rankings a ton after the freshman year. And we'll get questions, why not? And to me, Andrew Marsh, and he's a 19-year-old kid. You always feel weird saying this, but he feels kind of maxed out from a skill set perspective. And that's why we didn't rate him that high out of high school, because we felt like he kind of is what he is, more or less. Like, he's missing some of the real high-end, feel for the wide receiver position. He doesn't have a lot of flexibility in his lower half. So in terms of maximizing his route running ability, like, maybe not there. He's not an amazing athlete. So, if you just want to rely on him as like a Ryan Wingo, at least Ryan Wingo maybe has like a rule, because he's just so freaking fast that you can get the ball in his hands and maybe try to figure things out like that. For a guy like Marsh, I just don't really think that there are that many outs for him moving forward in terms of professional development and checking all those boxes.
He's another one that got a lot of jailbreak screens and manufactured touches and
a ton.
It wasn't a whole. Yeah,
I sat down specifically to watch a couple of Michigan games like in the moment last year, and one of them was one of the ones where he had like a ton of catches and a ton of targets, and it's just like none of this is really translatable in my opinion. He just is very clearly like has the best set of hands, and they trust him the most of this ragtag group that like isn't even strong around him. So not to disparage the kid. I mean, obviously he had a very nice season, and I could very well see him doing this for a couple more years, even though it's a new staff, I think it's very clear that they trust him and Bryce Underwood likes him and all that kind of stuff. I just don't really see much room for improvement that would make me think that like this is a guy the NFL is going to really, really like. There's a couple guys like that every year. Like Donovan Alugbade was one last year at Missouri. Like he kind of is what he is.
All
year,
guys that John Arrington loves.
A guy this year that I think is really like that is Jordan Clay, who's at Washington, who's been getting a decent amount of hype for them. He's a guy that's like real contested catch reliant, not super bursty, like wins downfield at the catch point. Like these are just skill sets that don't necessarily translate. So he could be a really productive college guy, but we have him, wide receiver 25 or whatever in the class, and people get bent out of shape about it. And it's like, yeah, because 3 more years are going to go by and he's not going to be much better than he was today.
Can I, on Marsh real quick? Because I think this, again, specifies a little bit of it. I'm looking at his freshman profile of what we wrote up about him going to Michigan. Because I don't think we were wrong on this. We put, excels at attacking the ball, really, really good hands, some of the best hands in the class, really good when the ball is given to him and allowed to create space, really good at creating separation at the catch point. However, again, he has a very good athletic profile. He really does. Limited route tree could help expand that more. Well, we didn't see much of that last year in his freshman season. Not physical at the line and can struggle to get off the line or create separation at the line or within the route. Really only creates at the catch point. Not much yak potential, but does have surprising speed. So in moments can look really good. Andrew Marsh could arguably be the best wide receiver currently on Michigan's roster, and adding Bryce Underwood boosts his upside immensely. If Michigan chooses to actually pass the ball more under new OC Chip Lindsey, Michigan could finally have a sneaky fantasy wide receiver in Marsh. I think we absolutely nailed that on Marsh, and you both are 100% right that he's a Trojan horse. I just don't know that he develops anymore, and I definitely don't think that happens as much as we love Jason Beck, Felix. He was in both of our top – I just threw something on my desk. Both of our top offensive coordinators and schemers here in college football, I don't think they're going to continue to develop him. So, yeah, I think what Austin said right there is true. Like, and it kind of goes what you were saying too earlier. Feels like people looking at the box scores and everything are going to say, oh, Andrew Marsh, he's this rising, but he's not being developed. They take what he's good at and succeeds, but I don't know that translates to the NFL.
I just thought of this. We had a JJ Buchanan ranked as a tight end. Now that he's been listed on the Michigan depth chart as a wide receiver, would he crack your top 30? Because it wouldn't matter if he was it wouldn't matter if he was a tight end or wide receiver. I was still going to be high on him. Now, instead of, a cheat code wide receiver, to me, he's on the Deuce Robinson level of trajectory. In Austin, I said, would he be in your top 30? You said no. He would for me. Tell me what your objection to that statement is.
I just don't really have a lot of trust in these bigger wide receivers that I think lack some of the – like they're really good at like catch point, getting – you can win downfield because they're long striders, but it kind of takes a little bit for them to get opened up and get downfield. Maybe you'll get offended when I make – like, could he be Reed Harris?
Oh, my God. We're going to talk about Reed Harris.
Like he could be, but Reed Harris isn't really a guy that like I love the profile either in terms of like moving forward. There's definitely space for those guys in college, but at best, it feels like the majority of the time you're going to be in NFL teams like wide receiver 3-4. It just is a really tough role again moving forward.
But he could be Michigan's wide receiver 1 this year.
He could, or 2. I still think they'll prioritize Marsh, but it wouldn't shock me if they're pretty close in targets and stuff by the end of the year. That would not shock me at all.
I do think it's apt to say that JJ Buchanan, Deuce Robinson, and Reed Harris all super similar style.
Cut from the same cloth. Yeah.
Cut from the same cloth. I like all 3 of those guys. Okay. Is there anybody else I want to talk about here in our top 30? I don't think so. Let's get to some elephants in the room. Actually, yeah. I want to get to this, and then I'll let you guys pound the table for players, because we've had some comments in the chat, gentlemen. And I almost spit out my cognac when I saw this, that Danny Scudero, who's going to win the Biletnikoff this year, is not in our top 30. Matthew, you're largely responsible for this.
Yeah.
Why? Why is he not in our top 30?
Well, number one, I know the ranking that is on there. I do have him at 38, not 70. But that is Tell me why. I'll let you answer after. Actually, I do not think Danny Scudero is going to win the Biletnikoff this year. I don't get me wrong. I love Brennan Marion, who is their offensive coordinator, wide receiver coach. We talked about it again. If you want to hear more about him, go to the episode Felix and I did a couple weeks ago talking about offensive schemers and the wide receivers that he has helped develop throughout his time in college football. Is a very good list. And I do think that Danny Scudero is an interesting wide receiver, really good hands, or for the most part, very good hands. I do think, he's a little bit on the leaner side. I'd like to see him get bigger there. Can get jammed against physical corners, but does do a really good job creating that separation within route. I don't think that he's great, necessarily has a great catch radius, doesn't do really good at the catch point, but hey, he's got really good body control. So I just said a lot of negative things about what I think Danny Scudero could do, and he played really good competition last year for what I think he is as a wide receiver. Now, going to Colorado, I think he's going to be Colorado's one. And as we talked about on that show, I actually think Julian Lewis is going to be able to distribute the ball for the most part because that's what he is as a quarterback, a distributor. Except for the fact that their offensive line might be one of the worst in all of college football. And so when he is getting blitzed, will Julian Lewis actually be able to get the ball to a guy who really only creates a separation within the line, within the route? Not at the line of scrimmage. He's not going to have, I don't think, the time to really win deep. So I don't think that Danny Scudero is going to be a guy who puts up the amount of fantasy points and or / production he did last year when he was playing competition. He was better than. I think he is a P4 player. I should put that overall. I think he can be. And I think he's going to get drafted. But he's not going to put up the stats that he put up last year, in my opinion. And I think Colorado's going to have a better year. Again, I'm kind of on the Colorado train right now with the wide receivers they have and what Lewis can be. But that offensive line is still bad, and you have to have a decent offensive line to do things. We saw at times last year some of these better end schools, Ohio State being one of them, when their offensive line struggled, guess who else did? Everybody else. And can we not argue that Ohio State has better talent all over the offensive side of the field than Colorado does? So I do not think that Danny Scudero is going to win the Biletnikoff. I don't think he deserves to be in our top 30 because I think even if he has a above average college football season, I don't think he's got the athleticism or the necessary route running chops to be drafted in the top 3 rounds. I think he's probably a round 4 guy. So at this point, why does he deserve to be in the top 30?
Chat, I want to know your thoughts on Danny Scudero not being in our top 30 as Austin. I get your thoughts about Danny Scudero, obviously explosive season last year. He's playing in the slot. Like I care about being able to get off the line of scrimmage when you're a boundary wide receiver. I care less about it when you're off the ball playing in the slot, moving around. You have some separation just by virtue of your lining up. So Austin, what are your thoughts about Danny Scudero, the San Jose State turned Colorado wide receiver?
Yeah, I think the two things, as someone who does have him in his top 30, I think he's like 29 or something for me, so he's in there. I do think that it's a very low end NFL profile, and I just think it's we, as in like the country, not just C2C, are severely underrating the possibility or probability that we see the Colorado stuff just totally implode upon itself this year. I think there is a better likelihood of that happening than this offense humming along and Danny Scudero puts up 1,400 yards. Like, I think it's very risky investing in pieces of this offense. So
is it because of the offensive line, or are you just
I think the line's terrible. Like borderline unplayable at the P4 level, I suspect. And I don't trust anybody there to coach anybody up. I think
you don't trust Warren Sapp to get the
Warren Sapp is not a coach there anymore, as far as I know. So I will cut them some slack on that one. It took them about 3 years to realize that, but they finally figured that out. I wouldn't let that guy near like with my children, like
kids. Yeah.
Hell no. I think it's going to be a really interesting battle of the egos between Brendan Marion and Dion, which I think has a potential to be like, I don't even think Sean Lewis is the egoist guy, and they had issues, and Brendan Marion, like by all accounts, is the egoist guy out there when it comes to college coordinators. And I just don't know, like, it's an offense that needs a strong running game to get going. Like, you point to me at the guy on that roster that's going to put up a ton. Like, I don't see it. I think there's a real chance as someone who I feel like, even though I've been pretty against Deion from the start, I've at least had pretty reasonable projections for the Colorado. Like the first year, I was like, I don't know which wide receiver you draft, but I think they're going to throw for a bajillion yards. And they did. And last year, I was like, I think they're going to have some serious troubles because this QB doesn't fit the system at all. And they did. I think this year we're going to see some really, really serious problems with a QB that can't escape pressure at all and a line that's going to allow a lot of it over the course of the season.
And to Austin's point real quick on the running backs, because we talked about it on the show, Brennan Marion likes to run a 2 running back offense, and that's where
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, that's where he gets the passing from. And if you don't have the offensive line to even block up the running, they're going to do the same thing they did at times to Shador and just drop everybody at coverage, send 3 at him. And here's the thing. Look, I don't know that any of us were the biggest fans of Shador, like in the way he was being projected as a first-round pick. I think we were all saying probably not a first-round pick. Julian Lewis, I'm pretty sure is less athletic than Shador, or at least on the same scale. So we saw Shador struggle with that. Now you're talking about a guy who also, correct me if I'm wrong, Austin, not transferred up. What is he? Reclassified up a class. So he should be a true freshman in college this year and is now trying to get that. And he was on the smaller side as well, which is why we had him lower in our freshman supplemental guy. Was like, this dude needs to put in some height and weight into his profile. Now he's doing that again behind an even worse offensive line. So that's my biggest fears on Scary. It's not necessarily about him as a player. It's about the overall package.
Yeah, no Jordan Seaton there protecting the blind side. Jordan Seaton now at LSU. And when you guys talk about the offensive line, I think about the spring game and them coming out of the tunnel and looking like they were all 5'8", 150 pounds. In fairness to Colorado, Austin has always been a Colorado Buffaloes Bear since Deion has been there.
Correct.
And if they can get it blocked up, this is one of the better wide receiver cores in the country. I know that they're not in our top 30, but Cam Perry is an excellent wide receiver transferring over from Miami. Ernest Campbell, who's running track there at Colorado, might be the fastest player in the country at any position. And then, of course, we know Danny Scudero and Joseph Williams. And I didn't even say DeAndre Moore's name because I don't think DeAndre Moore is going to get on the field. I think he's going to be the 5th wide receiver there. So if they get it blocked up, Julian Lewis is a Teddy Bridgewater type, and he could distribute this ball. But, to your point, let's see if that happens. So it is the Big 12. It is the Big 12. Another player that I want to ask about here, because he is getting some hype, and I thought I saw like a big time, like Steve Smith or somebody big like that talk about this player, and that is Georgia's second-year wide receiver Talon Taylor. Now, Talon Taylor, he probably would have broken year 1-0 thresholds had he stayed healthy. As a matter of fact, I can't remember which game it was, but he had a big drop in a big game that would have been a touchdown. It would have been like a 40 or 50-yard reception. He probably would have hit 1 or 2 of the thresholds right there on that play, and then he ends up being injured for the rest of the season. Austin, what are your thoughts about Talon Taylor coming back in year 2 off of an injury, but being a year 1-0?
Of all the rising second-year guys that didn't hit any of the year 1-0 thresholds last year, like I do think if you want to make a bet on one of them, he's probably the best or amongst the very few that you would feel somewhat comfortable at least trying to bet on, especially at cost. Although it seems like the spring hype maybe makes the cost a little higher, but I mean we really liked him. Obviously, the injury last year shortened the season, like you mentioned. He is, I think, a versatile player that can kind of do whatever they want, like they ask of him this year, and he can fill a number of roles for them, which I think will be really, really crucial. So maybe I don't necessarily really make a habit of betting on those guys anyway. So for me, probably not, but I think there have been much dumber.
Talon Taylor or Mylan Graham?
Oh, Talon Taylor. If there's a beat that I don't trust at all, and we're not talking Texas, it's everything is sunshine and rainbows, and everybody is amazing. So I very little trust in that group. They could be great reporters. I just that's where we're
at. Matthew, any thoughts on Taylor?
No, I mean, I think he's, again, we the year 1-0 theory that Austin and Chris have really kind of worked into putting all that work into is proven to be very good. Again, I understand it's because of injury, but that's also been accounted for in the year 1-0 theory. It's been proven that injuries really don't change much on that. That, you know, it's one of the things we talked about with, help me out here, Clemson's wide receiver that ended up transitioning to running back. For the life of me, can't remember his name. Adam Randall. There was a lot of people, you know, because of the injury, like, oh, well, but he was so good. I'm like, no, actually, Austin and Chris went back and proved that even the injuries, even if you finish the year 1-0, like, it doesn't matter with the injuries. And the other thing that worries me a little bit about Taylor is we've just seen it really since Monken left. They just don't really throw the ball a ton at Georgia. There's really not a way. Like, when's the last time a Georgia wide receiver broke 1,000 yards? You're going to look back a while.
They really, I mean, what I will say in defense of Taylor on that is that it feels like they've really tried to take like these like situational singular skill set guys and build an offense around it, which is effective if you can do the things you want to do offensively. You know, they have a Zachariah Branch that can work around the end zone, and then you go get Noah Thomas, who's only good within 10 yards of the end zone, and you go get him, and you make him, you know, stand in the end zone and wave his arms and see if you can hit him. Like, they've done, that's what they've kind of built their wide receiver rooms around. They haven't had a lot of wide receivers on that team that I would say like are multifaceted, are multi-skilled, and you can kind of ask them to do a bunch of different things. Now, maybe that they're just not going to be successful using a guy like that because he doesn't, you know, he's not Zachariah Branch who can break a 60-yard catch at any time, and he's not Noah Thomas who's 6'7" or 6'6" or whatever. But I do think in his defense there is at least a little bit. It's a little bit of a different situation that they haven't had a lot of there. And I don't know exactly why they've done it that way. I mean, it's just cheaper maybe, or easier to build those wide receiver rooms. I don't know.
I mean, I think Taylor is a good enough wide receiver to be their wide receiver one. I think he's a very twitchy athlete, very good at creating that separation. But, like, would it surprise either one of you if at the end of the year, Taylor is Georgia's wide receiver one and he's got 700 yards and like 4 touchdowns?
That was Ladd McConkey.
I think if you're a Taylor truther, though, you consider that a win, probably.
Sure, yeah, you consider it a win, but like from a fantasy perspective, that's probably a guy you're starting in your flex a couple times. Like, he's not a guy that you're talking about as being like a wide receiver one, if that's the way. But so like that's where like my concern kind of comes from on that side. He's still a guy that I think I had him as like my wide receiver 5 maybe in the class. I mean, we were high on him. We were very high on Taylor. And so, yeah, he's still a guy that I would believe in a way. I don't know that I believe in like a massive upside based on where he was coming out of high school.
I am apparently the high guy on him of the group, which feels very odd because I have him at wide receiver 101 in my rankings.
Where's the rest of this at?
Highest by like a decent amount, like 50 or 60.
Do I even have him ranked?
Yeah, you got him 153.
Okay.
So
I want to give you guys 30 seconds. There are some here. Speaking of players that we have differences of opinion as far as ranking goes, Charlie Becker, the Indiana wide receiver there. Matthew, you have him at 52. I have him at 27. Austin, you have him at 13. Austin, make a 30-second case, or you can say that you just have him misranked on Charlie Becker.
No, I mean, just a pretty good athlete. Can do a lot of really like great body control, really strong at the catch point. I think we haven't seen enough of him to know, like, can he do anything after the catch, or is he a catch and fall down guy? You know, I don't have a feel for that yet, but I do think he's going to be the 1A or the 1B in an offense that's probably going to throw for 32 to 3,500 yards this year. It's a pretty consolidated room overall. It's going to be him and Nick Marsh. So there's some CFF, you know, hedging, where like even if he doesn't end up being good, like a good quality NFL prospect, you're probably still getting some pretty good college value out of him.
I actually meant to throw that to you first, Matthew, because you are the lowest on him, you know, by a wide margin. I meant to ask you, you know, are you going to defend that position at 52, or are you going to move him up?
I mean, I might move him up some, but he's not going to be anywhere near even where you have him, Felix. You're kind of in the middle ground, I'd say, of the two of us, maybe a little bit closer to Austin at the 27. I get what Austin's saying, but I just don't know if Cignetti's offense is still going to be as pass heavy. We've seen it kind of transition at times, even as time of James Madison before they made their way up to the college football ranks or the CFB area, that he at times could run the ball more. I'm interested to see if Josh Hoover can even bounce back to support 2 wide receivers. I think so, because I do like Josh Hoover, but I do think Nick Marsh is going to be the main guy. And I think Austin kind of said it right there at the end. I personally don't think Charlie Becker has much of a true like high-end NFL upside. And I don't know that I think the CFF ceiling is there for him to be ranked at least as a top 13. Maybe 52 is too egregious. and I could see bumping him.
You
I'm
know,
looking at my
who
ranks
Charlie
and-
Becker reminds me of.
You're
This
gonna
is not just.
go ahead.
Who am I going to say?
I assumed you were going to say like Lad McConkey or something like that.
No, not Lad McConkey,
Interesting.
but Alec Pierce.
I wasn't that high on Alec Pierce, and I was the one who loved Alec Pierce.
Alec Pierce is the stretch wide receiver, and that would be Charlie Becker's, role, and that was his role at Indiana last year.
I mean, I don't want to say that Felix did a whole rant on Campus Life while I was out, which is now the Campus to Camp podcast, talking about if a guy had a different name and what he would be ranked. And now we're comparing white Charlie Becker to white Alec Pierce. I mean, I didn't want to have to say that as we're sitting here, and yet, here we are.
So sure, I think I could admit that maybe he shouldn't be all the way down at 52, but I think if I'm looking at my wide receiver rankings now, I would probably still keep him right around the 37 to 44 range, which is not much higher than where I have him now. So I'd bump him up a little bit. But
Signetti, we trust, man. I think we've hit the point where I have stopped questioning this dude until he has his bed crapping session, which we're not there yet.
When everybody's not 23 on his team, then we'll see how.
And that's fair, and I don't disagree with that. He was my number one offensive schemer. But I also went back through and talked about everything. His wide receiver twos were not that good for fantasy throughout his entire. In fairness, some of that stuff only went back to James Madison coming up to the CFB ranks, right? So I don't know some of that stuff when they were a little bit lower.
Luxury now, where he's shopping in a better aisle. We're slowly moving our way up the quality of player that he has access to, and so at a time where maybe it is easier to run the ball because running backs are a dime a dozen, finding a quality receiver a little more difficult.
Yeah.
There could be some of that too.
That's fair.
Are we going to go to an Indiana? I want to go to I'm not joking on this. I want to go to an Indiana game. I want to go to the Ohio State game. Are we going to do that this year?
Austin posted that C2C is paying for it. He marked down check mark. Got it.
I was taking notes you guys think that I'm paying for you to go.
No, I saw check mark as in go, so I've already started flowing the paperwork and everything. I thought we were going.
It's Saturday, October 17th. I want to go. Okay. I didn't mention this player here about being misranked because I want to mention him now. I'll give you guys some time. Give me a player that you want to pound the table for. I think it's funny. Do you guys remember where that expression comes from?
No.
To pound the table? Okay. Well, at least where I'm bringing it from. Back in 2016, it was said that Kyle Shanahan pounded the table for former Utah running back Joe Williams, and then Joe Williams did absolutely nothing in the NFL. So maybe that's some foreshadowing here. But the player that I am absolutely pounding the table for, speaking of if his name was something else, if Griffin Wilde's name were LaShawn Williams from Miami, he would be in this top 30. There is not a time that Griffin Wilde has been asked to play football where he has not been excellent. From his time at South Dakota to last year at Northwestern, this is a guy who can run routes. This is a guy who has size, solid hands. I think I have Griffin Wilde at wide receiver 7 overall, and you guys don't have him ranked. That's just a mistake on you all's part. And this is going to be my Lad McConkey when we look back and say, I told you so, I told you so. It's going to be Griffin Wilde, right, Austin?
I just want to make one thing very clear. I will not be bullied into moving him like everybody else on this team has been. I refuse. You can clip that. I will not be bullied into this, Felix. He's fine.
Matt, do you have any thoughts on Griffin Wilde?
I don't even think I have him ranked, do I? So
Colin didn't have him ranked either when we talked on the campus.
I mean, no, if he's not ranked, I mean, sure, I guess I'll go spend a little bit more time looking at him and see if I can put him in my 150.
I have Griffin Wilde ahead of Deuce Robinson and behind Jace Brown. Deuce Robinson, I guess, is another guy that I have.
Look, we all make mistakes, so it's okay. No big deal.
Okay, who are you pounding the table for, Austin?
I think I don't have I didn't pool all the data. So maybe this is just a wrong answer, but a guy that it feels like I'm just the highest on compared to the group is Joshua Moore, the Miami wide receiver, who's going to be a second-year guy this year, who's overshadowed a little bit by Malachi Toney last year. But I thought Moore was pretty good last year. I had some question marks on him coming into college because he wasn't Like he's a big physical, really good athlete, but like wasn't asked to play wide receiver much in high school. He's one of those. So you're like, what does this translation look like? I was really impressed. They went to him as like a go-to guy at specific times late in the season, in the playoff, etc. Finished the season, like the stats were fairly modest, 17 for 210 and 2. But I think he's going to I think he's going to be their second wide receiver this year. I think he's going to have a pretty big role. I think we're going to see some growth in usage and just deployment and all of that kind of good stuff. So he's a guy that I have him as wide receiver 31. It's not like a wide receiver 7 like you with Wildy or something or anything, Felix, but compared to everybody else, I see 94, 84, 77. He's a guy that I think is going to be at minimum like a really high quality college receiver over the next few years, and he's got that really nice size.
That's why I love. This isn't Ari Wasserman calling out Cam Coleman as being a breakout. This is why I love these shows. Matthew, who do you have as the guy?
Reed Harris on his comparables. Did you see that, by the way?
It wasn't Reed Harris. It was it was Equinemius St. Brown. Reed Harris is,
I have prospects highlighted on mine. I don't do the historical. Okay. I do prospects. So guys that aren't. He's got Malachi Fields, Reed Harris, Denzel Boston as his top 3.
Okay.
So that's the kind of guy he is.
Matthew, who you pounding the table for?
Yeah, a wide receiver that I am higher on. I actually don't think Austin has him ranked. I have him closer to the 30 range. And I guess I wouldn't say shooting from deep here because Felix likes to like pull players that nobody's talking about, like Griffin Wildy here. But a guy that I think is a little bit of a player that many people will not be drafting early. And he'll have to come in your freshman supplemental drafts. I'm taking Kenny Darby, the true freshman at Kentucky. He's been getting a lot of love this spring. He's a player that I really liked in our freshman class. I'm pretty sure I was the highest on him out of our group. Some of the best body control in the class. He consistently shows the ability to contort his body to make tough catches, specifically on the sidelines, really strong hands. He has a decent amount of burst that helps him be a little bit more of a yak threat, but is not a guy who's going to break the big plays, but he's very physical and really does a good job using that physicality and creating separation. When he is running after the catch, I think he's got one of the best stiff arms in the class. Now, his route tree is fairly limited, and he does struggle to kind of decelerate. And as I said earlier, kind of create that separation within the route without the physicality. But he's joining a Kentucky team that literally is that wide receiver room has almost been completely vacant. What do they have? Is it probably just DJ Miller is probably the main guy I would say there in the Kentucky room. Currently joining a team with Kenny Minshew, I think is going to be a pretty decent quarterback for Kentucky, and joining a Will Stein-led offense that, again, I had him as one of my top offensive schemers in the game with what he's done. Again, not just at his time at Oregon, where I think everybody kind of attributes a lot of things to him, but if you can go back to his time at UTSA with the fantasy producers that he put in, for the life of me, I could probably pull my 9 pages of notes up again really quick because I did not delete them. Those are going to go in the Hall of Fame when we win when we win a daytime Emmy for that performance. There's a Campus to Canton museum. Yeah. Yes. Oh, here we go. Top offensive coordinators. Let me just find them real quick because I can't remember where I had them on my list. As I am scrolling here, Joshua Cephas, Zachary Franklin, those were the two that at UTSA that were very good for fantasy for him while he was the offensive coordinator. Then again, he has a very long list of wide receivers. He's again, even players even like Evan Stewart who had their best years with him at Oregon.
Austin, I just heard you talk about Will Stein. So do you want to rebut anything that Matthew just said?
I think while I don't have like the firmest take on it, I think there's a decent likelihood that Will Stein is a fraud. Very interested to see how this plays out over the next couple of years. Although, you can be a fraud and still get, highlight a single receiver. Your offense can highlight a single receiver every year. So, that wouldn't necessarily take away from that. I will just say Darby is literally the first wide receiver that I like, the highest that I don't have ranked. Like I do a cutoff at a certain point before spring news just to see how many of these guys are actually playing. Like I don't advocate drafting a ton of freshmen. So I kind of wait and hear who positive news is on, and then I'll filter these guys in. So he is a guy that would be added in after spring is over. But I don't believe in Will Stein very much. So we'll see.
Comments and likes on the videos help us a ton. I'm going to be back at 6 o'clock with the CFF ranking show. Matt and Austin are going to be back at 8 p.m. with On Three's Alan True as we go over the freshman class in depth. And by the way, we're going to have the spelling bee. We're going to have the spelling bee again, Matthew. So get back from your soccer game. We appreciate you guys tuning in. It's Campus to Canton week, guys. Come back at 6 p.m. Peace.